participants will be here in the webinar?
It should be more than 30.
Oh, sure. So we're gonna start now?
Yes, please.
Sure. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to SEASAC International Webinar. We would like to acknowledge all the speakers of today's international webinar, Mr. Arijit Roy, the Vice President and General Manager of Salesforce, Mr. Agustinus Miranda from Astra PSO, Mr. Bruce Edward Wicks from Rangsit University, moderator of today's international webinar, Ms. Syayu Zhukhurffa. It is amazing how time flies. We finally arrived on the third day of SEASAC 2021. The suspense is getting real and real because we are expecting to find out who are the winners of the SEASAC 2021. But before that, we are going to hear a webinar on topic dealing with uncertainty that will be moderated by Ms. Syayu. Ms. Syayu completed her bachelor's degree of science in communication at Universitas Indonesia and her master's degree of new media and society at University of Leicester. In 2017 until 2018, Ms. Syayu worked for Microsoft Indonesia as a social community manager. She used to be a communication manager at Indonesia One Health University Network in 2018 until 2019. In addition, she was also the account manager for MOCA in 2019 until 2020. Currently, Ms. Syayu is a lecturer of Business Administration Department at Parahyangan Catholic University. So without any further ado, please welcome Ms. Syayu Zhukhurffa.
Okay. Thank you, Rosaline. Good afternoon, good morning, and good evening to all the speakers and participants who already entered this webinar. I would like to thank everyone, and I would like to remind you that this session is part of series of the Southeast Asia Sales Competition event. The topic for this particular webinar is dealing with uncertainty, confronting the unknown. In this webinar session, we have 3 speakers who will share their knowledge, experiences, and insight related to the topic. The first speaker is Mr. Arijit Roy, the Vice President and General Manager of Salesforce for Indonesia region. The second one is Mr. Agustinus Miranda, the Branch Manager of Astra Toyota Sales Operation. Mr. Agustinus has more than 20 years experiences in sales and marketing, which made him has various insights and deep knowledge related to sales operation. And the third one is Mr. Bruce Edward Wicks from Rangsit University. He is the lecturer in international program, English language course in instruction in classes for bachelor's degree study, including marketing, international marketing, society and law, introduction to law, English composition, business English, operations management, and so many others. So just for your information, each of the speakers will share their presentation for 10 to 15 minutes, and the Q&A session will be held after all speakers finish their presentation. You can type down your question in the Q&A box, or if you watch this on YouTube, so you can write down the questions in chat or comment box. So without further ado, we will welcome our first speakers, Mr. Arijit Roy from Salesforce. The screen and time are yours.
Thank you, Ms. Azu. It's a pleasure to be part of SEASAC, I think. Thank you, Ms. Azu, again. I hope everybody can hear me. It's a pleasure to be part of SEASAC 21, and hopefully, it's going to be a fun 1 hour sharing life journey and taking a lot of questions and hearing the other speakers. Again, thank you for the invitation. Let me know when you can see my screen.
Yes,
Yes,
it's good.
very clear.
Yes.
All right. So that's my name. Essentially, typically we would start, this is a safe harbor statement from Salesforce. That's typical. And I would love for you to read each and every line before we go to the next slide. No, it's just there. Again, thank you for really inviting us. Very privileged to be here. It's just fun to talk to people who are starting their careers. You're competing for a prize, which is always amazing, and it's fun to compete. I think that's over the years. One of the things we would all have learned is it's fun to compete. It's fun to be in the race, because if you're not in the race, you may not win it. So it's great to see so many participants dialing in as well. A little bit about myself. I think the journey, that's where so I was born in a city called Bali. I know most of you are business students, and I know a lot of people are dialing in from Indonesia. And that's the beautiful Bali, that's the fun Bali, that's the spiritual Bali. But I was born in the city which is very close to Calcutta or India. So if you Google it, now you have Google. It's in India. It's a small town, but every time I've landed in the airport in Indonesia, I've always had a warm welcome. So it's obviously country I love. It's a city I enjoy being in, and I miss that. So grew up with again, it's been a fabulous childhood. Essentially, landed up doing a lot of funky things in childhood. Let's talk about why business, right? My first job was working for a radio station, and this is for most people in '98. There was no FM in that sense. It was just a digital transformation in our lives. And I started my career almost 22, 23 years ago. So there was hardly digital. So what do you need to keep in context as I walk you through this journey? Imagine a life where there was no Google. So if you wanted to look up somebody, there was no LinkedIn. If you wanted to call somebody, there was no mobile phone. You had to pick up the old school phone lines. If you wanted to send photographs, there was no digital camera. So you had to wait, print it, post it out, maybe. There was no Facebook. And then the last one, which is probably the last two major changes in the last 22 years of selling, there was no video conferencing. And the last thing was there was no Gojek and there's no Uber. There was no Grab. Now imagine you start a sales career. Keep that in mind as we talk about the life journey. So essentially, the first job that was for me, the most digital transformation thing happening was working for a radio channel, which was, at that point of time was moving into an FM. And essentially that was way back in 1998, but it got me started to really figure out to have responsibility where I was not dependent on my parents, responsibility to, earn my own money and learn how to spend that money, to know really if things were expensive, things I could afford. And it gets you a sense of discipline. So it was really good fun. And then I decided to, step out of my comfort zone, and I landed in Singapore. It was, again, for those of you who've been in Singapore, it was way back, when there was still the old ERP. It was not a digital ERP, right? So again, that was something where you went in and you looked at the parking coupons, you put a parking, and that was how things are. Fast forward that again, one of the things I did, landed up Singapore, and it's been a fascinating journey. For my adult life, we've been Singapore again, met my wife, got married in 2002. And one of the things which, again, a lot of you, we talk about inclusivity and diversity. One of the things which, we took as decision as a young couple getting married was we wanted to both be pursuing our careers, and we will find time for each other to kind of balance it out, right? And my wife's in IT world, and it's a world which is changing continuously. But essentially, one of the key things is about really, ensuring that as buddies, as best buddies, as friends, how do you balance each other's careers? How do you balance other time? Essentially, one of the things I realized, Ian, is, how do you continue? As the knowledge, if you look at how the technology was changing, one of the things I wanted to do is go back into, school to kind of refresh my knowledge. And that was the reason I went back into NTU. to kind of, get a degree, essentially to refresh my knowledge, to be more relevant to the industry. And that was a fascinating journey. Again, going back to school was fun. Obviously it's long hours, it's extra work, but it's essentially something which looked at. But what that helped me was, it helped me to kind of get back my knowledge and also to rethink about life at that particular point of time. So two things happened post that. One was I managed to get a job at Oracle. Again, it was through essentially an acquisition that happened in Oracle. One of the things which also taught me about life at that particular point of time was to give back to society, because at that particular point of time I had a child, and one of the things which I learned as a parent was really you're responsible for a new life, and there are so many other kids who do not have a similar privileged life. So with a few friends, we started up a charity called Learning Inc., which was essentially look after kids whose parents did not have an option to put them in school. And that was the best part of weekend hobby, if you want to call it, because it gave a purpose to life beyond just having a career, having a family, and that. And then one of the opportunities which Singapore gave me was also to volunteer for the Singapore Armed Forces. So I signed up for that when the policy changed, and it was a very, very humbled and privileged life, because you had an option, to give back to the nation at the most grassroots level, which is really to wear a uniform and pledge to protect the country. And I'm very, very humbled to be able to have that opportunity to do that. And post Oracle, at that particular point of time, from a career perspective, I landed up going to Google. But before that, the thing in Oracle is, while it was a big company, all the jobs I did was starting, a new business unit within that company. So it was around, those days was analytics. Everybody talks about analytics today. But if you look back at 2006, analytics or data was still there. People still needed to do reporting. People still needed to do, analytics. So I had an opportunity to look at business which would start for ground zero. So I had an opportunity and privilege to be the number one employee for anything Oracle launched in analytics. And that was fun because nobody else has done that. It was entrepreneurial, yet you had a big company, so you could, tap into resources. And that kind of got me hooked on to, taking on roles, which was all entrepreneurial, obviously in a bigger firm. That took me to Google, essentially fast forward that. And again, it was a time when, Google had launched Google Maps for enterprises. And I was one of the first few team members to go in and, take that to enterprise customers. So imagine a situation where, if everything was free, Google Maps was considered free. It still is free. But for enterprise customers, how do you go and tell the enterprise customers, oh, this is a paying product, and how do you use it? So now obviously Gojek uses it, Grab uses it, Uber uses it. But again, go back to 2012, how many of these companies existed? And imagine how many enterprise companies actually used a GIS solution like Google Maps. And that's the context. But it was, again, a phenomenal learning, being entrepreneurial. Nobody had done it before. It was fascinating to talk to companies, who were growing. And this was a great learning curve. And after 4 years at Google, I went to Microsoft to lead up their data and the AI business. And by that time, the industry was changing. It was talking about IoT, it was talking about AI, it was around machine learning. And again, the key thing is technology is something one needs to understand, but it was very critical to also understand, how we are doing in terms of, relevancy towards customers. How does this actually benefit the customers? Because if you talk about AI, yes, every company does AI, but does it actually work for the customer's benefit? Do the customer gets ROI out of the investment they're going to make? And that is, as a salesperson, and I know a lot of you here wants to get into a business career and a sales career. The key I've always felt is one needs to understand technology, but also one needs to understand how a common sense way you apply that technology when you talk to your customers. Because talking very detailed technical stuff to, let's say, a chief marketing officer, or somebody who is a business owner running a fleet of taxis, or somebody who is, imagine going to Pizza Hut and saying, how do you help them deliver pizzas better? They are not looking at, what are the nitty-gritties of the technology. They're trying to solve the problem. They need to get pizzas delivered in time in 15 minutes somewhere. right? And how can you help them to do it in 12 minutes? That's what they're trying to ask you. So yes, if you say, look, IoT will help them solve it, yes, it's a term. We need to understand it. But when you're translating that to the person at the front, retail experience or the customer experience, how do you translate that? And that's the key of being successful, for your company that you represent, to make your customer successful. And that's the key. I felt always to do that. Fast forward that's the picture of my family. Got 2 young daughters, and I'm now at Salesforce for the last 3 years and running Indonesia for the last 1 year. So that's pretty much on the life journey. And the companies I've always had very, very privileged to do that. So I'll skip to the next slide. And I know this was something which people work at. I think I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this slide, but essentially the world has changed, right? It is about how do you connect over video conference? How do you connect with people who haven't met? And as I said, one of the easiest thing for me personally has obviously been because I started in a world where having a telephone was a privilege. So now obviously I can talk to customers over video conferencing. I have, a collaboration tool to coordinate with. So I probably had some of that advantage that I started my career in a time where technology was very, very limited. But even then, one has to figure out what works for you. Does it work for you to build a relationship over writing a very strong content which somebody will read on a mobile phone? So do you write 5-line email or do you write a 20-line email? Because most people are looking at a digital format. Do you connect them over a social channel like LinkedIn? Can you get them connected through a reference? So there are ways to connect still, and people are obviously learning how to connect differently through different channels. You have to find your own style, given in the new world, we will all be connecting a lot more digitally. The advantage one has today is there are multiple options available, but one has to find style which works for you as a person and which you think would work for the audience you're trying to reach to, right? Because everybody's bombarded with webinars, everybody bombarded with EDMs, but there are still customers who want to talk to you. There will be people who would want to talk to you if you're finding a job. There will be people who are looking for talent. How do you find those people? How do you interact with those people? That's the key learning. But yeah, the model, even for Salesforce, I think changed. I know a lot of you have worked on Customer 360, and I'm not going to pitch that. That is not a session, but I know you've worked on that. I mean, as a company, we offer that. But what I would like to spend a little bit more time, I think some people had mentioned about why is it good, as Salesforce, fun place to work. I think one of the key things for Salesforce, obviously around the stuff we do, things like, and this is something we would ask, when people come in for interviews, what do you do for fun? What do you do to give back, to the society? And these are very, very key things for us. And this is some of our values, how do we contribute back to the society? And these are the things we do talk about, in our internal meetings. Is something we are very proud of as a team. And these are the kind of values we look at when we, when we interview people. And I'm sure a lot of you, are aware of that, and a lot of you demonstrate that in the world you're in today and in your personal lives.
Hi, Arijit.
How am I doing on time?
You only have like 2 minutes more.
Okay, let me go back to the last part.
Okay.
I know it's some of the advice. So firstly, have fun. I mean, one of the things I've learned a lot later in life, always have fun. Life has a way of making things out better. Second thing is really around being grateful. It is about life to me, is about being spiritual, being connected. If you give back, you do well, you're grateful for what you receive. There is a power in the universe which takes care of you. The third thing is put in the effort. If you think whatever career path you choose, you got to put in the effort and the hours, because it's all about the practice it makes you. And the last thing is you got to be in the race, because only when you're in the race, then the opportunity happens for you, then things will get better for you. That's pretty much for me, and I'll stop there. Well, thank you again,
Okay,
for the opportunity to present.
Yes, thank you very much, Arijit. Okay, everyone, since Mr. Arijit will need to go, I think yes, around like 6 p.m. Singapore time. Is it right?
No, I can stay back. Don't worry. I think I'm okay to go with your format. This is fun, and I will find the time. Oh,
okay. So, Miss Dian, I will run through the next session, next speaker. Is it okay?
Yeah.
Okay, then. Thank you, everyone. Okay, for the next speaker is Mr. Agustinus Miranda. Are you here yet? Okay, Mr. Agustinus is here. You are on mute.
Okay, yes.
Okay, yes. Please,
I'm
the
ready.
screen and time is yours.
Thank you. Good afternoon, all SEASAC webinar participants. Allow me to introduce myself. I am Agustinus Miranda Wijaya. I work for PT Astra International Tbk Toyota Sales Operation as branch manager since 2000. So I almost 21 years in PT Astra International Tbk Toyota Sales Operation. Is a company engaged in the marketing and service of Toyota vehicle. Okay, as we all know, in Indonesia, the automotive industry is one of the industries most affected by the COVID-19 pandemic. After the travel, tourism industry, and aviation or maritime industry. At the beginning of the COVID pandemic, especially in April and May 2020, sales fell by 90% from normal, as we see. But after that, it continued to increase to 50-60% from normal, and currently it is still 55% below normal. The COVID pandemic has had a huge impact on our business operation, impact on customers, supply, sales volume, process, and behavior. The COVID pandemic is making automotive industry decrease dramatically. This was caused by decrease in power public buying and change in consumer behavior after the pandemic. The most considered economic factor is due to its purchasing power decrease due to lost income, as well as community priorities change to meet primary needs first. Okay. The automotive business in Indonesia must be able to map how consumer and change in post-pandemic priorities, resulting in product innovation and services can be tailored to existing market. Okay. Currently, automotive manufacturing companies are starting to develop digital features for its sales and after-sales service, starting from the process, make an online sales service look for an authorized dealer closest to make sales and test drive booking. Okay, sorry. Okay, sorry. Okay, according to 2020 McKinsey research, the automotive business in Indonesia must be able to map how consumer and change in post-pandemic priorities, resulting in product innovation and services can be tailored to the existing market. And then, okay, and data from, sorry, Accenture 2020 report saw a drop in light sales vehicle globally to penetrate in the 20% in 2020. The players at the automotive industry must understand when the market will start to stretch again pandemic. Trends and innovation. Currently, automotive manufacturing all automotive players, companies are starting to develop digital features for its sales and after sales service, starting from the process, make an online sales and booking service, look for authorized dealer closest to make sales and test drive booking. As example here, Honda Indonesia is currently developing an innovative application equipped with various sales and after sales features for its customer or its user. It aims to respond to changed customer behavior in times of an increasingly digital and pandemic contexts. In the future, automotive industry must be able to compete with the advantage of the innovation of the digital world in reaching out consumer. Third quarter to attract its customer when launching the model new Yaris to the market. New, where other competitors must be able to create digital experience that is no less interesting. This innovation in the digital field can be the right strategy during pandemic, where all business process must be supported by technology and digitization to reach consumer and its user. Hygiene package service on vehicle. The COVID-19 pandemic has made the cleanliness, health, safety, and environment sustainability factor to be the main priority of consumer in buying private vehicles. Thinks this is an opportunity for automotive companies in Indonesia to developing innovative healthcare package for vehicle owner. This is as an example. Okay, let me explain automotive landscape 2020 using 3C analysis to explain the automotive landscape to 2020. First, change, customer, and competition. First, in outer cycle change, first, intermittent social distancing. Automotive manufacturers are currently in confusion due to the PSBB regulation, making the mobility of the Indonesian people decrease. This causes people need for motorized vehicle is decreasing and has an impact on total production and sales of automotive products in Indonesia. Number two, global supply chain disruption. The COVID-19 pandemic is an antithesis of globalization. Currently, many countries are carrying out export-import restriction between countries due to health problems and safety. This has an impact on Indonesian automotive manufacturing supply chain because a lot of spare parts and equipment that must be imported to produce a good car vehicle in Indonesia. 3. COVID-19. With the spread of COVID-19 virus, people income has decreased, so the purchasing power will luxury good, including private vehicle, will decrease. Availability of vaccine will be a bright spot for the Indonesian economy and will have a positive impact also in the Indonesian automotive sectors. 4. De-densification, the urbanization. With the spread of the COVID-19 virus in Indonesia, the community is getting bigger, pessimistic about their future. The people income has decreased, so the purchasing power will luxury goods, including private vehicles, will decrease. Availability of vaccine, okay, for Indonesia will be a spot for Indonesian economy. Economic recession. Restriction on mobility and access to urban areas are numerous people are increasingly reluctant to live in cities. Finally, there is a trend of the densification and the urbanization, because people are more comfortable to live in a suburb area. Less mobile society. The imposition of strict social restriction in various areas make the community increasingly reluctant to do mobility. This changed the habit of the post-society, a more or less pandemic. This factor causes the automotive industry to grow decreasing because the need for mobility decrease. In middle circle, we talk about customer. First, micro mobility revolution. The COVID-19 pandemic creates new habits in society, where a trend micro mobility makes everyone just going out of the house to travel long distance just close. So that in the future, automotive manufacturers must start to innovate, developing the right choice of vehicle for short trips. CHSE conscious. The hygiene, health, and safety factors are priorities in post-society COVID-19 society. Number 3, about private car wins again. Private vehicle, especially cars, will be the safest choice for the pandemic. And used car preferences, one side of the car will be the prima donna, but the purchasing power of consumer at the moment pandemic crisis is on the decline. So as the result, used car will be the preferred choice attractive to the post-pandemic society. Sorry. Okay. 5, flexible on-demand mobility on the rise. Today, consumer increasingly want flexibility in various things. This is caused by the COVID-19 pandemic, which creates uncertainty in all aspects of human life. In the automotive industry, for example, people need financing vehicles are more flexible because the decreased consumer to get choice of mode transportation according to need is also a service that will be booming after the COVID-19 pandemic. We, WFH, work from home policy that begin to be adjusted to the condition of the pandemic made some community groups are increasingly their mobility. In some office has implemented the WFH hybrid concept, where within a month or 2 weeks will work at the office and 2 weeks at home. This policy can be breeze fresh for the automotive world due to the significant increasing in mobility. The last inner circle competition. First, digitalize customer channel. In the future, players in the automotive industry must start developing digital customer channel in response to the contactless economy, where the perpetrator is working on consumer through digital channel.
Mr. Agustinus,
starting from the
minutes
left. Okay, yes. Okay. Next, healthy and hygiene features. And the third, supply chain resilience. Number 4, remote selling model. The post-pandemic automotive industry must be able to develop remote business model selling, where exhibition companies should start developing a commerce, virtual expo, and other digital sales channel, so that the automotive business can be adapted with the limitation of conventional high-touch business process. And the last one is automotive robotic. Manufacturing production process must develop automation and robotization for minimizing high-touch physical contact. Okay. Thank you. The last.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Agustinus. Thank you very much. It's really a lot of insights we got from your presentation. And now it's our last but not least speakers is Mr. Bruce. Hello, Mr. Bruce. Are you there?
Hello.
Yes, okay. Please, the screen and time are yours.
Okay. Okay. I seem to have some difficulty sharing my screen.
Okay,
Okay, sorry.
probably Budian can help.
Okay,
Oh, okay.
stop, sir.
Okay. I'll remember to stop. Here we go. You cannot share your screen while the participant is sharing.
Yes.
Agus, can you stop this?
Oh, there we go.
Done.
I think we're okay now.
Okay.
Can everybody see this?
Not yet. Not yet, Mr. Bruce.
Oh. Let's see. Oh, it says someone else is sharing. Let's see, share. Okay, there we go. Share. Okay. All right, there we go. Hey, this is about change. The talk today that I want to talk about is about change. I just want to start off with thanking all the organizers of the SEASAC competition this year. I've participated here in Thailand in the past, and I recognize that it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work. So on behalf of someone who's done it before, I just want to thank all the organizers of this SEASAC this year, because it is a great benefit. As far as the participants, I would just like to suggest with the participants is, hey, there's no losers in the SEASAC competition. Of course, there are some winners, and we applaud the winners and we compliment them on their hard work and their effort. But at the same time, hey, everybody wins. You gain a lot of experience through this, looking at one particular process of the business, one particular process of the business in a very hands-on way. So, and plus, all the participants in the SEASAC's competition, now you have something to put on your very slim resume that you can use when you graduate and try to get a job. So thank you all. Thank you all. Hey, I just want to talk about some changes, about business changes, okay? And go back way in the beginning of the Industrial Revolution. You know, about 100 years ago, that's when people started to, that's when management consulting was created. And I know a lot of you know about Frederick Winslow Taylor. Hey, he was the one that first started pioneering time and motion studies by looking at how you could produce things more efficiently by studying how you do that. And then it got great application with Henry Ford with the assembly line. You know, the interchangeability of parts, the specialization of tasks, and getting people to focus on the discrete elements of the production process. Just fast forward a little bit to Peter Drucker. I'm sure as business students, many of you have read a lot of the ideas about Peter Drucker. But look, this was in the 50s and the 40s. He articulated ideas about what management was all about. You know, defining objectives and then determining how you could achieve those objectives, organizing the environment of a modern corporation so that it could achieve productive work, right? It was and also during this time, this was the birth of the modern industrial organization and that pyramid style of organization where at the top is a CEO and it trickles down to the bottom to the real production workers. Right. You know, Porter, I'm sure most of you know about Michael Porter, who was born in 1847. But he looked at the 5 forces, the competitive advantages, the Porter diamond. He was one of the pioneers that looked at modern business and looked at it as the different discrete elements of business and how you could maximize the talents of an organization in each of those discrete areas. You know, this SEASAC competition has focused a lot on the sales aspect. And you know, one of the old sayings that you can learn is that if you're a salesperson, you are never without a job. Because if you know the skills of how to sell something, you can apply those skills everywhere. And of course, always, if you know how to sell things, you'll never be want for a job because you'll always know how to sell yourself, right? So other ideas. And then remember in the 1980s, I call it the Japanese contributions. You know, total quality management, the idea of how you define quality and how you achieve quality. You know, up until the 80s, probably the most common quality tool that was used by productive organizations was acceptance sampling. You just, hey, you sampled 10 out of 100. If those 10 were okay, then you figured the rest of the 100 were okay. And acceptance sampling was developed in the 1940s. Also with the JIT, just-in-time inventory, and lean manufacturing, trying to incorporate continuous improvement in all of the elements of an organization. You know, these modern management tools that were developed in the 80s, hey, everyone uses them today. Also, one thing that the Japanese contribution was tended to decentralize an organization. You know, I can remember Microsoft, reading about Microsoft when they developed their early Windows and when they developed their early products like Encarta. Their organization had 6 or 7 layers, whereas other companies, you might see dozens and dozens of layers from the top of the management to the bottom of the management. But Microsoft and these early tech companies really adopted and embraced these ideas of how to flatten an organization so that it can become more productive. Oh, something else too, I always like to talk about the Michael Jordan effect. You know, this was in the 1980s also. Air Jordans were released in 1985. And what the Air Jordan effect to me is, the Michael Jordan effect, is it taught companies the value of brands. Companies like Nike, companies like, and follow on with the Air Jordan, they recognize that if you create huge brand awareness, that can become an incredible competitive advantage. You know, prior to this time, prior to quality, prior to brands, the most competitive thing that a company had was price. If you could sell something, a good or a service, lower than someone else, hey, people would embrace your product. But when quality came about, it changed consumer perceptions. And then in the 80s, that's when brands became another important thing that could give an organization a competitive advantage in their product or their service. And how, for example, Nike, how they did it is they used their logistical talents to keep costs low. They lowered their labor costs by shifting their labor to low-cost countries, and they were able to do that through the birth of logistics, you know, moving things from place to place. Oh, just a little, think about change, because we're talking about change. Somebody that I always like to mention is Thomas Kuhn. He was somebody who postulated the idea of paradigms, how new ideas can be created and how they can dominate. And then that new paradigm becomes accepted in a certain body. It's been applied in philosophy, it's been applied in science, and it's also been applied in business. And he pointed out that change is not an evolutionary thing. Change is something that can happen very quickly. Something that comes along that disrupts the idea can change the way people think. You know, and of course in business, the person that coined the term creative destruction, Schumpeter, He said, look, organizations, because of the competition in the capitalist system, people are always trying to compete, come up with new ideas, and carve out a bigger niche in the marketplace. And so he focused on the idea that, hey, if you're a business, you have to recognize that you have to change constantly. And for him, he used the example of railroads and how they killed small town agriculture. Because at that time in the 50s, agriculture in the United States was still a large part of the economic system. But railroads came about, people could ship goods long distances at low costs, and so nobody went to the local market anymore because they could go to the big supermarket and buy things. There's huge examples of this creative disruption in business that you can find. Xerox in copiers. Who uses copiers anymore? Polaroid used to be a huge multinational photography company. They're gone now. IBM used to be big in computers. IBM stands for International Business Machines. That was the sine qua non of that business for decades, of making different kinds of business machines. But what happened? They ended up selling all of their product to other companies, and they just focused on services because they said that's going to be the future. Some of you can still remember when you were younger and you hung out in shopping malls. But if you look at shopping malls today, particularly in the United States and Europe, shopping malls are ending. That whole hanging out at the shopping mall, getting some fast food, trying to meet some guys or trying to meet some girls, hey, that whole experience is going away because e-commerce is coming along to supplant it, right? Nowadays, hey, how do you listen to music? When I was young, we listened to records, and then we listened to cassettes, then we listened to 8-tracks, then we listened to compact discs, then MP3 players came about. Do any of you remember these things? Probably not, because now everybody streams off of internet-based services. So you can see in a lot of industries, if you're going to be in business, you have to recognize the fact that things change all the time, and you have to be willing to ride with this changing tide. The iPhone effect. I think about how many people wear watches now. In the past, everybody wore watches. Now watches are fashion accessories because everybody's got a phone that has a free watch with it. I think about fashion. Think about Mango. Think about Zara and how they've revolutionized the fashion industry with flash fashion. In the past, the fashion industry used to revolve around the spring collection, the summer collection, and the fall collection. They used to change the fashion ideas 3 times a year. But these flash fashion distributors came about. And now if you go to a Zara, you go to a Mango, you can find that the fashions will change maybe twice a month, because those companies, being creative, they can ride the tide of the quickly changing fashions. And because they're very keen logistically, they can produce these fashions quickly at a low cost and get them into their retail centers. Also, especially with Mango now, about 40% of their business is all online, because again, they've recognized they have to change the focus of their business. I just always like to think about this. In 100 years ago, 50% of the people in the United States were farmers. 40% of the people were industry, 10% were in services. Nowadays in the United States, almost 77% of the business is in services. So if you were thinking about now, what do you want to do with your career? I don't think you'd want to be a farmer. I think you'd want to focus on services. You know, the e-commerce revolution. You can bank, insure, invest, advise, program, buy, borrow, sell, all online. So looking at e-commerce, there's a lot of business opportunities as entrepreneurs, or if you want to get into business. You know, in the past, if you were smart, you were good with numbers, people would say you should become an accountant. I would suggest today, if you're sharp, you know numbers, you should think about getting into logistics, because that is a key competitive advantage that the marriage of communication technology and the internet has made to be a big strength that companies can rely upon. Hey, the idea of a black swan, what the idea of a black swan is, it's some surprise event that's got a big impact beyond the normal expectations. But in hindsight, people say, oh, we shouldn't have anticipated that. I remember in Thailand around 10 years ago when there was a huge flood that flooded a lot of the northern portions of Bangkok. And when I say Bangkok, I mean like 100 kilometers north of Bangkok. This area is filled with industries. About 40% of all the thumb drives and other kinds of memory is produced in that area. But all of that manufacturing facilities, hey, they were all swamped with this flood. Who could have predicted that? Hey, what about this COVID? Was COVID a black swan event? Was it something that nobody could have predicted? No, I don't think so, because I think a lot of companies thought about this potential disruption in their business operations, and they had plans in place to answer this kind of a business disruption.
Mr. Bruce, it's 2
yes.
minutes left.
Okay, the last thing I just want to finish on is I just finished training with a large, I just finished some training with a large multinational company here in the Bangkok area. And they're this company, they produce a lot of optical equipment. And I'm sure a lot of you have probably used some of their equipment, but I'm not going to mention it because they certainly haven't given me permission to talk about their operations. But I just want to mention, because I had a lot of contact with the people that worked there and a lot of comments about how COVID had particularly affected their company. For example, in operations, they mentioned that, hey, getting components and shipping final products became a huge issue with the company that raised up a lot of costs. And one of the individuals, he made the comment to me that he missed the just-in-time ordering days, because he said, you know, it was so much easier when we had a big inventory on hand. Also, what it did was it highlighted the value of, for example, material resource planning, where companies, the material resource planning is the programs that link the orders to the deliveries and the production in between, and it highlighted the importance of MRP. Also, the QA was quite affected in the companies. For example, all the head office people from the United States, as soon as the COVID came, they all left. And so it was all operations based on video conferencing. And people said, hey, they didn't like video conferencing because the communication was so stifled. Also, training really suffered because there was other activities people had to fill up their days with, so they couldn't get involved in training. Also coordinating with suppliers. You know, if they, for example, if they changed some tooling or something like that, hey, it was all video conferencing. It was much more difficult. And then the biggest change that I noticed in the company was HR, you know, the human resource management. You know, employees had to be screened. Employees had to be monitored to make sure that they didn't get involved in COVID areas, and then they would bring the COVID into the work. You know, setting up the temperature monitors and things like that, and then getting employees to recognize the importance of following these health guidelines so they wouldn't jeopardize the workplace. Getting people to wear masks, getting people to use hand sanitizers. But most importantly, what I admired about this company is they expanded this concept to try to teach employees more about just general hygiene and how you can stay healthier so you can become a more productive contributor to the company. And then the last thing that I was impressed with is because a lot of people, their morale suffered because of this COVID. And the company made a lot of efforts to engage in very discrete activities that boosted employee morale. So these are just some observations in the real world that I saw how one company dealt with the COVID. Hey, again, I want to thank the SEASAC people for this opportunity to do this presentation. And I want to thank them, and I want to thank all the participants, because whether you realize it or not, you gained a lot from this SEASAC activity. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bruce. Yes. Wow, there's a lot of things to learn about what we've been through right now. Okay. So if you guys have any questions to all the speakers, you can send to the chat box, or probably if you want to speak directly, you can raise your hand and you can ask the speakers. So this is, I think, the first question from one of the participants. The question is, how soon full or higher education degrees will become old-fashioned or part of history? I think this is for Mr. Bruce.
That's a good question about academic degrees.
Yes.
You know, hey, you go to university, right? What do you learn in university? I would say that when I was in university, the business ideas that students learned, about 75% of them are old-fashioned. But the one thing that you do learn in university, which is the most important thing, is you learn how to think. You learn how to analyze. And that's something that creates lifelong learning in a student. So academic degrees, bachelor's, master's, PhDs are always going to exist. But as a student, you have to recognize that just because you get a bachelor's, just because you get a master's degree, that doesn't mean that you have to stop learning. You have to continually learn all the time. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bruce. Okay, that's a great question, I think. So anyone, is there any question from YouTube, maybe? Budian? Oh, okay, if there's no, you guys still think about your question, I have some questions. So first, I want to ask Mr. Arijit, are you still here?
I am still here.
Okay. So I want to ask about how this COVID situation impacted the Salesforce itself and how you cope with that.
I think when it hit, I remember still my last flight was in the early first week or second week of March. And I think at that particular point of time, it was still, different kind of information coming out. And businesses, including Salesforce, got impacted in terms of, okay, what do you do next? Because it's unprecedented in terms of, conferences being shut down, sales kickoffs were shut down, customers were not very open to meet. Some of them had. So it was a pretty chaotic moment. I think it impacted everybody. Where we started, looking at things, what you could control and things where you had to kind of look at. So there are two things Salesforce did. I think one is, as a company, given our social responsibility, the company went into procuring PE kits, went into looking at how do we work with our customers who are looking at how do we get people safely to work, and how do we get them productive, right? I think so. Those two things is something as a company we did. Specifically in Indonesia, I think we were hit very similarly. And then we had to look at, how do we optimize our customers' processes better as they were looking at optimizing their investment into the portfolio, they're investing into new projects. But in a simplistic way, I think the first 3 months was something, if you look at the time frame from May to March to about May, I think it was really about finding how do you manage, how do you cope. And on the employee side, we also looked at things like how do you keep people mentally healthy? How do you, look at the new routine of becoming, physically, active while we are spending 8-10 hours on a screen. So those are the areas Salesforce worked on internally with its employees and with customers and partners.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm very curious because previously I worked in startup and it hits hard on them. So I kind of curious with other companies. Okay, is there any questions, Ms. Dian? From other? Oh, okay, you have one. Okay, Mr. Lee. Okay,
Yes.
go.
My question,
Can go
Arijit, first, thank you for your nice presentation. And I also believe that finding your own style and having fun while work really is one of the keys to success. You also said that making customers successful is a key to success. And I talked to a lot of salesperson and I found out that companies put a lot of pressure onto their salesmen to push the sales and also do a lot of micromanagement. So at first, how do you handle this at Salesforce? And what do you think personally about that? How do you make the customer wanting to buy and not trying to sell something with pressure?
Very good question, Lee. I think if you are in a sales job, it is going to be a quota carrying job, right? And if you look at, it is something which, if you enjoy, it's like playing sports. If you're related to sports, right? You got to go in there and you got to perform every day you play the game. So there's no different in sales. It's again something which, if you aspire to be in, getting into the process of being able to deliver a number because that's your responsibility is something everybody will expect for. What has worked for us is really around the fact that we've got a very robust process of how do you, let's say, do pipe gen, how do you do deal progression, how do you engage with customers in different situations. Obviously COVID makes it extremely harder because you're doing it digitally versus physical capacity, but the framework always existed. How do you connect to customers in different manners, obviously through our own Salesforce platform and different digital channels that's available. How do you manage the stress on the day-to-day as an individual or as a manager? Really, in my view, comes down to you. Yes, obviously you need to have an environment which allows you the trust that you will be successful, right? And a framework to coach you to be successful. But a lot of things are also in your control, in the sense that how do you do for fun? Like, do you go out and take a walk? Do you talk to your family? Do you go out? That is something you need to manage and find your own style of doing it. Last thing, when it comes to customers, right? The customers have a need. Now, that need is going to get fulfilled through your solution or through somebody else's solution. Question is, how do you fit into that solution? End of the day, people buy from people, right? It is, yes, great technologies exist, but you need to make your customer aware what is the values you're going to bring in, and you got to work, especially if you're in Asia. I realize pressure doesn't work of throwing discount. Yes, everybody wants a good deal, but it's not just because you throw a better price, somebody's going to buy. You have to build that trust, you have to build a relationship, and then it's a give and take, like in any relationship, why they would invest in you and your technology. So those are the things that's worked for us. And again, if you enjoy sales, this is what you come to the game for.
Okay, thank you for your answer.
You're welcome.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Arijit and Mr. Lee. This is another question for Mr. Arijit. If you would have just 5 minutes to discuss with a potential job seeker, which are most important questions you would ask?
It's a very interesting question. I think in today's world, leadership or the person you work for becomes very critical, right? I think you need to ask, obviously, around the values and the vision, the job this particular person is doing, or the one you're applying to, the leadership style and the values they have. I think that becomes equally critical. And the third thing is really around, you got to have a pitch about how do you think you would fit into, the position you're applying for. So if I have 5 minutes, really around leadership, values, And then the second would be, pitching in how would you fit in into those values, and why would you want the job, or what are you passionate about? That's probably, I think, in fact, Salesforce, we used to have this. If you look up the Salesforce stars in Singapore, in San Francisco, there is a competition, where you would have a choice to, if you're a startup, you were pitching, as you would travel up from level 1 to, I think, the level, whatever the highest was, is about 3-minute lift ride. And you had to make your pitch in that 3 minutes. So that's pretty much what you have time for.
Okay, sure. So if you would like to join Salesforce in the future, that may be a good insight for you guys. Okay, any other question?
May I?
Okay, sure.
Yeah.
Yes, Mr. Ruli.
I think this question is for all of the speakers, because I think we have a combination of consultants, entrepreneur, and academician. Yeah. Well, lots of prediction about the future, that the world is changing, and well, part of me, I'm not that sure that it's going to be changed significantly, or maybe there are some changes in some industries or in some areas, but I think well, the interesting question about the first question, how soon full or higher education degrees will become old-fashioned, I don't think it's going to be part of the history, because for me personally, I just realized that the old-fashioned is better, at least for me, and I talk with my colleagues that they prefer the old-fashioned way instead of the current way. Yeah. But what do you think about is it true that the world is going to change significantly? I think, and it's going to be sustained, because I think for some industries, for salesperson, that it is important for them to what do we call it? Make some strategy about the future, because if you're mistaken about your prediction, then yeah, it's also going to hit you hard, right? And yeah, is it? Yeah, that's mainly, that is my question. Thank you, Bu Syayu, for your time. Yeah.
Okay, maybe we could go to Pak Agustinus first. You could share your thought about the question.
Yeah, maybe for Pak Agustinus, because he is in the industry that hit hard by this pandemic. What are Toyota or Astra prediction about the future? Is it going to be changed? And then what kind of strategy? Of course, you cannot tell the exact strategy, because your competitors can copy it. Yeah.
You are on mute, Pak. Okay.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Ruli, for the question. I think today we see all about changes in every aspect, triggered by technology and revolution of digital 4.0 now we are going to 5.0. Every aspect changes, and we have to change. We have to change. If we didn't change, so we like to accelerate the changes, and we will absolve. So every industry right now must predict it, how to survive for future, and how they prepare, all all factors that make change their competition situation, and their external and internal factors. I think we must accelerate of changes, Mr. Ruli.
Yes, thank you for your answer, Agustinus.
Okay, thank you. Maybe now, Mr. Bruce, you have any thought about the question from Paruli?
Oh, I think that change is, of course, accelerating. If you look at, for example, do students know what a fax machine is? Hey, and for many years, there's been talk about it being a paperless society. Hey, that's fast becoming the norm now. People aren't using, in 20 years, will people know what paper money is? In the automobile industry, electric cars are going to dominate. And if you look at 20 years ago, or even 15 years ago, who would have ever thought about something like Facebook or the whole phenomenon of social media? So you can say certain, like for example, electric cars are going to change today, but as Mr. Roy said, with technology is creating changes in things that we don't even know today. So yeah, I think life and change, our relationships, the way governments act, the way the urbanizations around the world because of the rise of industries. Yeah, change is going to just continue to accelerate. It's something everybody has to adapt to.
Okay, thank
you,
Mr. Bruce. And last one, Mr. Arijit, any thought?
I think absolutely change is fascinating. I think simple things like my kids are growing up and saying one of the things, like Mr. Week said, driving was something very critical because that was independence for us when we were growing up. Kids today are talking about driverless cars, so that's not a skill they want to learn, right? They're saying, look, I would rather read a book. And the thing which fascinates me the most is space. And looking at SpaceX, I don't think, when I looked at all of those, I could ever think that there would be a tourist on space. So change is definitely impacting us, and it's fascinating. I think Mr. Weeks earlier said that. I think adaptability is key as students. Having a growth mindset is key. I think change that allows you to be, have fun and change essentially. But absolutely, change is constant.
Okay, thank you for the three speakers for the answers for Mr. Ruli question. The next one, we still have questions from Albert Tobing. This is for Mr. Agustinus Miranda. I once talked with a person who believes that the picture of future transportation is actually that people don't go anywhere, but rather they stay at home while visiting virtual reality-based world or places. Maybe like now, but with fully integrated 5 senses experience. Do you think this is possible? Or how would you picture future act of commuting in the society? Mr. Agustinus?
Okay, thank you for the question from Mr. Albert Tobing. That's a very good question. I think in the future, everything is possible. So far, what we don't think about happen, what we don't think about has happened. And what we think about it happened too. So I think everything is possible because the revolution is shorter than before. Like from revolution, industrial revolution 3.0 to 4.0, for the 5.0 is shorter. So everything is possible in the future, I think.
I think we lost you, Mr. Agustinus. Hello? Okay. I think we got disconnected from Mr. Agustinus. Okay. We'll continue when he get back, I think. Anyone with any other question? You can just raise your hand or open your mic. Okay, we're still not getting Mr. Agustinus back to the Zoom. Okay, then. Then I will ask a question to Mr. Bruce. So we know that today is really machine era, you know, like most of the company and they really trust the machine to do the work. So what do you think about this change? What we need to do as a human being to increase our value in purpose to not being replaced by the machine era?
Well, that's a good question, because in many industries, for example, if you take a look at electric cars, there's been some studies that if electric cars replace internal combustion engines, about 25 to 30% of the automobile industry, for example, automobile repair or automobile service, all of the jobs will be eliminated. The electric cars are examples of consumer products that can be made much cheaper with robotic technology also. So yeah, it's something that, as we've talked about, the percentage of, you know, one comment that I often make is in the future, everything's going to cost 10 cents, meaning that consumer products, the costs will continue to go down because of the efficiencies that robotics and other kind of technologies come about. But at the same time, the opportunities are, there's going to be a lot of service jobs, a lot of jobs that we can't even conceive now that are going to be available. So that's why, as students, you know, the concept of lifelong learning, you never know. I would venture to guess that 99% of the students now who have some idea of what they might want to do in the future, you're not going to be doing that in the future, because things change all the time. So you never know where you're going to end up. So being able to have the skills to be flexible, being able to have the skills to adapt to new changes, and also being able to have the skills to continue to learn new ideas. Hey, that's what you need to be successful in the future.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Bruce.
Thank you
for the answer. Hopefully we are not all being replaced by the machine then. Okay, so any other questions, guys? We still have some time. Okay, this is from Mr. Riku to Mr. Arijit, Mr. Arijit. How the pandemic has changed your way to lead and manage your organization, apart from having contacts remote?
That's a very, very good question, Riku. It definitely, you know, is difficult to manage and lead, or the level of difficulty to manage and lead is a lot more difficult, you know, when you're not able to meet and you're across the screen. For example, you know, when you have new members in the team, it's very easy to go meet customers, like in a sales role, right? Where you can do a joint presentation together, you can, you know, lead the presentation, and you can see how the other person can pick up some of the tips and the tricks, and vice versa. So obviously it's challenging to do that. One of the ways you could try is, you know, do a little bit more preparation in terms of dry run to test out the different scenarios that could go wrong. One of the most common things which we have all learned how to do is ensuring that, like in this session, like the Zoom screens, that you've logged in a few minutes early, you know, it's got, you know, challenges looking at it, internet could drop. And so preparing a little bit better on the tools which you're going to use to present. The second is around tolerance, because a lot of people are working from home, which means, you know, space is constrained. All of a sudden you have more people at home during the daytime, you know, people. So, you know, things like having a child walk into while you're presenting for a customer, having empathy for that or having tolerance for that, because that is in the new normal, that can happen. The third thing is also being about patient. Things are not going to be as efficient or as fast moving. So, how do you do when you say patient in a sales role? What do? You work to reach out to more people, try to find more new solutions or challenges they're facing. You spend time listening more because, while listening was critical at every aspect, you got a little osmosis. To me, those three things, right? Prepare a lot more better, practice, the content with your colleagues, have your tools ready, be more tolerant, be more empathetic, and thirdly, have a little patience with the process because customers are equally facing similar challenges.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Arijit. Oh, we got Mr. Agustinus back in the session. You can you are in mute. You can continue your answer.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Agustinus.
Thank you to Mr. Tobing, yeah. Okay, I think in the future everything is possible, triggered by a revolution in technology and in other aspect, other factors. So I think everything is possible. So far, we don't think about has happened. It's happened, and we think it happened. Actually happened. I think transportation mode for the future is very different with what we see right now, because the electric car will be developed more. More massive than before, and the car based on fossil energy will be absolute. I think like that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Agustinus, for the answer. We still have like 5 more minutes. Do you have any other questions or want to share your experiences also? No?
Yeah, maybe I can
Okay.
share a little bit of my experience. Yeah, the reason why I asked my question previously about I still have my doubts about these sustained changes regarding the pandemic. Also, yeah, of course, if there's an advancement or invention in a certain technology, it will, and then it can get accepted by the society, it would change the world differently. But the reason why I asked the question is because where I live in Bandung and in Jakarta, I went back and forth from Bandung to Jakarta. I don't see any significant changes in the way people live their lives. Yeah. In a initial period of the pandemic, they stay at home. They get scared to go outside, and then they only connect to other people through internet communications or phones. But I think in this recent condition, they get rushed to go to the old normal, like they miss that kind of condition. So they want to buy cars, they want to change their cars, they want to because they want to go somewhere else with the new car. Especially my question is for Pak Agustinus, whether Astra has some special strategy or in facing the future, or outside of the electric cars, of course. This is because of my knowledge about my surroundings. Maybe it is different with Singapore or Thailand, but in Indonesia sometimes I look at people and they want to go back to the old condition faster, something like that. And of course, I haven't seen any invention or advancement in technology that can change the world significantly. Maybe I am mistaken because it is only based on my knowledge. Thank you, Syayu.
Okay. Thank you very much, Pak Ruli, for your insight. Maybe anyone would like to say something about his experience or?
Okay, question to Roy
Okay,
Arijit.
Mr. Felix.
I've got a general question about sales and the culture. Because in university, we learn the cultural differences, Lewis model and everything. And I think you're in contact a lot with America as well, in Europe and Asia. Now my question is, if you are in a sales meeting or in general meetings, do you have to adapt to their culture, or do you have to change your attitude if you're doing sales with Asia, with America, or with Europe?
That I'm assuming that's for me. Look, it's a very, very fascinating question. So I'll give you my example. I'm born in India. I grew up in Asia, and I'm pretty much an immigrant, and I'm a foreigner in every country in Asia, right? So adaptability is the key. I think for what works is, are you open to be humble enough to accept that the culture you're going to operate is going to be different than the culture you grew up with? I think that to me is the first one. Are you humble enough? Are you able to adapt to certain basic things within that culture you're going to operate in? That could be simple things like, for example, and this is interesting, right? In Asia, we always have a title for elders, right? We don't really, like, between the Western world and the Asian world, and this is the debate I always have, like, we don't really celebrate Mother's Day, right? But we touch our mother's feet, because that's a show of respect, or and that's something which happens across Asia. So I think as long as you're aware of the cultural, nuances, because there's good in every culture, as long as you're able to, adapt to the new culture. I'm not saying adapt where you need to know everything. It's more about, being aware of certain, intricacies of operating. And that's something which can be easily adaptable. If you're aware, self-aware, to say, what are the things do I need to do to adapt when I go pitch to a customer? It's like, for example, in Asia, things can happen where, because you're in traffic, you could be late. Now, it's that an excuse? It's not. But it is acceptable because that person is late because maybe they got stuck in a traffic, or they had the kids to drop, right? If I take things differently in Asia, and again, this is like working in an industry here, being a mother, being a daughter is very different, and having a job, because in Asia, a lot of times your in-laws and your parents stay with you. In the Western world, it doesn't. So as long as you're aware of these nuances and you're open to adapt, I think you can be successful in any part of the world.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Arijit. So I think we are really close to the end of this session. I would like to thank for all of the speakers. Thank you for all the knowledge and the insight that you shared to us. And before I get back to the Master of Ceremony, I would like to thank everyone who attend this session, and good luck for all the finalists who are now waiting for the announcement. And just like Mr. Bruce said previously, none of you are losers. We would like to thank you all for all the great efforts. Okay, thank you. Get back to you, Rosaline.
All right, thank you very much, Ms. Syayu, also all the speakers. It has been so insightful. So let us give our virtual clap for the webinar. So interesting. I would like to inform that this webinar can also be seen on Unpar official YouTube channel. And this webinar is the outcome of the great collaboration between the Business Administration Department and the Business Administration Laboratory of Parahyangan Catholic University. And the members of the team are Dr. Banowati Talim as the Competition Director of SEASAC 2021, Ms. Diansa Deli, Master of Accounting as Competition Organizer of SEASAC 2021, Mr. Albert Mangapul Parulian Lumban Tobing, Master of Business Administration as the head judge of SEASAC 2021, Dr. Maria Widyarini as the head buyer of SEASAC 2021, and Dr. Ruliusa Pratikto as the webinar coordinator of SEASAC 2021. And not to forget, this event will not be held without the support from our gold sponsor, Salesforce, our brands sponsors, iMultiply, Nordic Business Forum, and Rangsit Oil. Ladies and gentlemen, now we will have a dinner break for 1.5 hours. So let's take a break and see you at 7 p.m. Jakarta time.